The Zalarian communications array hummed with desperation as Captain Vextal stared at the holographic display showing their dying world. Purple veins of corruption spread across the planet's surface like a disease, turning their once green continents into barren wastelands. The ancient plague that had awakened from beneath their polar ice caps was consuming everything in its path, and their most advanced technology couldn't even slow it down. "Captain, the southern continent has fallen completely," reported his second-in-command, her voice trembling with barely contained fear. "The bioplague has consumed 97% of all vegetation and wildlife. Our projections show total planetary extinction in 43 solar cycles." Vextal's forearms hung limply at his sides as he processed the information. The Zalarian Confederation had ruled over 17 star systems for over 3 millennia. They were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced biotechnology and peaceful nature. Their gardens were legendary, their cities were marvels of organic architecture that grew rather than being built, and their people lived in harmony with nature for thousands of years. Now, all of that was crumbling to dust. The plague had emerged from the deepest ice shelves on their homeworld of Zalara Prime. Scientists theorized it was some ancient organism that had been frozen for millions of years, waiting for the right conditions to awaken. Climate changes from their industrial expansion had melted the ice, releasing something that their ancestors had apparently sealed away for good reason. "What about the evacuation efforts?" Vextal asked, though he already knew the answer would bring no comfort. 12% of the population has been relocated to our colony worlds, sir, but our ships can't carry enough supplies to sustain them long term. The agricultural ships they're not producing enough food. Without Zalara Prime's ecosystem, we're facing starvation across all 17 systems within 2 standard years. The captain closed his large violet eyes and tried to think. The Zalarian military was primarily defensive, designed to protect their peaceful civilization from raiders and pirates. They had never faced anything like this. Their weapons were non-lethal. Their ships were built for transport and exploration, not warfare against an unstoppable biological threat. "Sir," another officer approached hesitantly, "the Science Council has a proposal." Vextal turned toward the young technician, hoping against hope for some breakthrough. "What do they suggest?" "They want to send a distress signal across all known communication frequencies. A general plea for help to any species that might have experience dealing with this kind of threat." The idea was almost laughable. The Zalarians were among the most technologically advanced species in their region of the galaxy. If they couldn't solve this problem, what hope did they have that someone else could? Most of the other species they knew were either less advanced or focused on entirely different technologies. The Council specifically mentioned that we should include our complete biological and technological databases with the signal, the technician continued. "Everything we know about the plague, our world, our biology, our science, they believe that sometimes an outside perspective can see solutions that we cannot." Vextal considered this. It would mean revealing all of their secrets, making themselves completely vulnerable to any species that received the message. It went against every diplomatic protocol they had. But what choice did they have? "There's something else, sir," the technician added quietly. "The signal would be broadcast on the emergency frequencies used by the younger species." This gave the captain pause. The younger species were those civilizations that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Most established galactic powers ignored them, considering them too primitive and aggressive to be worth serious contact. The Zalarians had maintained that policy for decades, viewing these species as potentially dangerous and certainly not worth the risk of cultural contamination. But now, facing extinction, perhaps it was time to reconsider old prejudices. "What species are we talking about?" Vextal asked. "Several, sir. The Corvani Republics, the Stellar Federation, the Draconian Empire, and... The technician paused, checking his datapad. Something called the Terran Commonwealth. They call themselves humans. Vextal had heard of humans, though only in passing. They were described in the diplomatic files as a relatively new spacefaring species, barely 300 years into their space age. Reports described them as unusually aggressive, highly adaptable, and possessing a strange tendency to form emotional attachments to other species. Most galactic civilizations considered them curiosities at best, potential threats at worst. The captain looked around his command center, taking in the faces of his crew. These were some of the finest minds in Zalarian space, and they were all looking at him with expressions of desperate hope. Outside the ship's viewports, he could see the brown and purple stains spreading across their beautiful world like an infection. "Prepare the distress signal," he said finally. "Include everything the Science Council requested, our technological databases, biological scans, everything we know about the plague, and our location. Send it on all emergency frequencies to every species within range." "Sir, that will include our defensive capabilities, our population centers, our resource locations," his security chief protested. "We'll be defenseless if someone decides to take advantage." "We're already defenseless," Vextal replied grimly. "At least this way, we might have a chance." The communication officer began preparing the massive data transmission. It would take several hours to compile everything and encode it for universal translation protocols. As the work proceeded, Vextal found himself wondering if they were making a terrible mistake. The galaxy was full of predator species who would see this as an opportunity to claim Zalarian territory and resources. But as he watched another continent succumb to the purple corruption on the planetary display, he realized they were past the point of worrying about territorial integrity. Soon, there would be no territory left to protect. "Signal ready for transmission?" "Captain," the communications officer reported. Vextal took a deep breath, knowing this moment would be remembered as either their salvation or their final act of desperation. "Send it." The message burst out from their array at faster-than-light speeds, carrying with it the accumulated knowledge of 3,000 years of Zalarian civilization and a simple, desperate plea. "Help us." Across the galaxy, the signal reached dozens of species. Most barely acknowledged it, filing it away as another minor crisis in a distant sector. Some saw it as an opportunity for exploitation, beginning to plot how they might claim valuable Zalarian technology or territory. But in a small blue world on the outer rim of the galaxy, the signal was received by a species that had a very different reaction to distress calls. A species that had spent their entire history fighting against impossible odds, adapting to threats that should have destroyed them, and developing an inexplicable tendency to help others even when it offered no benefit to themselves. The humans had received the message, and for the Zalarians, everything was about to change. Admiral Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display in the emergency briefing room aboard Terra Station, humanity's primary deep space command center. The Zalarian distress signal had arrived 6 hours ago, and her team of scientists, military advisors, and diplomats had been working non-stop to analyze the massive data dump that came with it. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Admiral Chen said, her voice calm, despite the magnitude of what she was seeing. "An entire spacefaring civilization is facing complete extinction from some kind of biological plague, and they're asking for help from anyone who might have a solution." Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief xenobiologist, nodded grimly. "The data they've provided is incredibly detailed. This plague organism is unlike anything we've seen before. It seems to consume organic matter at a molecular level, breaking down cellular structures and converting them into more of itself. It's not just killing their ecosystem, it's transforming it into something completely alien." "What about their own response efforts?" asked General Morrison, the military liaison. Impressive, actually, replied Dr. Elizabeth Varga, the team's bioweapon specialist. They've tried everything from genetic engineering to energy-based sterilization. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours in many areas, but this organism adapts to everything they throw at it. It's almost like it was designed to counter their specific biological and technological approaches. Admiral Chen walked closer to the display showing the Zalarian homeworld. The purple corruption spreading across the planet's surface reminded her of satellite images of algae blooms in Earth's oceans, but infinitely more sinister. "What's our current understanding of human advantages in this situation?" she asked. Dr. Webb pulled up another display. "This is where it gets interesting, Admiral. The Zalarians are what we might call soft technology specialists. Their entire civilization is based on working with natural biological systems. They grow their buildings, cultivate their technology, and live in harmony with carefully managed ecosystems. And the problem with that approach? When those biological systems turn against them, they have no effective countermeasures. Humans, on the other hand, developed differently. We've spent our entire history fighting against nature, conquering hostile environments, and developing what the Zalarians might consider crude solutions to biological problems." General Morrison stepped forward. "Are we talking about going to war with a plague?" "In a sense, yes," Dr. Varga replied. "Look at human history. We've dealt with countless pandemics, biological threats, and ecosystem collapses. We've developed aggressive chemical treatments, radiation protocols, controlled burns, engineered viruses to fight other viruses. We think in terms of total warfare against biological threats." Admiral Chen considered this. It was true that humanity had a unique approach to problem-solving. Where other species might seek harmony or gradual adaptation, humans had a tendency to attack problems head-on with overwhelming force and creative solutions that others might consider reckless. "What's our timeline if we decide to help?" she asked. "The Zalarians estimate 43 days before total planetary collapse," Dr. Webb answered. "But we'd need to get there, assess the situation firsthand, and implement any solution we develop. Realistically, we have maybe 30 days to make a difference." "And what's the risk assessment?" Captain Rodriguez, the station's intelligence officer, pulled up a new display. "High risk, obviously. We'd be deploying to an active biological crisis zone, but the potential benefits are enormous. The Zalarians have technology that could advance human civilization by centuries. Their biotechnology, their agricultural systems, their medical knowledge." "That's not why we're doing this," Admiral Chen said firmly, though she appreciated the strategic thinking. "Of course not, ma'am, but the Security Council will want to know all factors." Admiral Chen had been in command of humanity's deep space operations for 8 years. In that time, she'd overseen first contact with 3 different species, negotiated 2 trade agreements, and prevented 1 interstellar conflict. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. The truth was, most galactic civilizations saw humans as aggressive, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous. Humanity's rapid expansion into space, their military-focused technology, and their tendency to interfere in other species' affairs had earned them a reputation as troublemakers. Most established powers preferred to keep humanity at arm's length. But that reputation might be exactly what was needed here. "Dr. Webb, in your professional opinion, do we have any chance of success?" The xenobiologist considered carefully. "Admiral, I won't lie to you. This is the most aggressive biological threat I've ever studied. The Zalarians are right to be terrified, but humans have certain advantages. We're immune to most xenobiological agents because we evolved on a completely different world. Our aggressive treatment protocols might work where their gentle approaches failed. And we have something they don't, which is experience with total environmental warfare. We've poisoned our own atmosphere, cleared entire continents, and rebuilt ecosystems from scratch. We know how to kill everything in a given area and start over, It's not pretty, but it might be what's needed here. Admiral Chen made her decision. General Morrison, I need 3 fast attack ships ready for immediate departure, full biological containment protocols, and load them with everything we have for environmental sterilization. Chemical weapons, radiation emitters, plasma charges, everything. Admiral, Dr. Varga interrupted. We should also bring our biological warfare specialists, not to hurt the Zalarians, but because they understand how to fight aggressive organisms. Approved. Dr. Webb, I want you leading the science team. Captain Rodriguez will handle security and intelligence. What about authorization from Earth Command? General Morrison asked. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. I'll worry about that later. Right now, there's a civilization facing extinction, and they asked for help. That's enough for me. The preparations took 18 hours. 3 of humanity's fastest ships were loaded with equipment that most galactic civilizations would consider horrifically dangerous. Chemical sterilization compounds, biological weapons designed to target organic matter, radiation generators, plasma cannons, and a dozen other systems that humans had developed for the specific purpose of destroying biological threats. As the small fleet prepared to depart for Zalarian space, Admiral Chen received a priority message from Earth Command. Admiral Chen, came the voice of Director Hassan, we've received word of your mission. The Security Council is concerned about humanity's first major intervention in galactic affairs. Understood, sir, but time is critical. We know. That's why we're sending additional support. The UES Defiance and the UES Retribution will meet you at the halfway point, full biological warfare divisions aboard. Admiral Chen was surprised. She had expected resistance, not support. Sir, may I ask why the change in policy? Because, Admiral, this is what humans do. When someone calls for help, we answer. It doesn't matter if they're human, alien, or something else entirely. And maybe it's time the galaxy learned that about us. As the ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and disappeared into the void, heading towards Zalarian space and an unknown biological nightmare, Admiral Chen felt a familiar sensation. It was the same feeling she'd had as a young officer facing her first impossible mission. They were about to show the galaxy what humans were really capable of when someone needed help. Captain Vextal couldn't believe what he was seeing on his tactical display. 5 human ships had arrived in Zalarian space, moving in perfect formation toward their dying homeworld. The vessels looked nothing like the elegant organic curves of Zalarian ships. Instead, they were angular, armored, and bristling with what could only be weapons systems. Captain, the lead human vessel is requesting permission to approach, reported his communications officer, voice filled with uncertainty. Grant it, Vextal replied, though every instinct told him this was either salvation or doom approaching. The human flagship, UES Determination, pulled alongside the Zalarian command vessel. Within minutes, a docking request came through, along with a message that had been translated into perfect Zalarian script. Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Commonwealth requests immediate meeting to discuss crisis intervention protocols. Time is critical. Vextal had never met a human before. The diplomatic files described them as bipedal mammals with primitive technology and aggressive tendencies. What he saw when Admiral Chen stepped into his command center defied those expectations entirely. Admiral Chen was tall for a human, with graying hair pulled back in a practical style and eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the room instantly. She wore a military uniform covered in insignia that Vextal didn't recognize, and she moved with the confident bearing of someone who had commanded others in life-or-death situations. Captain Vextal, she said, extending her hand in what the translator indicated was a human greeting gesture. Thank you for trusting us with your distress signal. We're here to help. As they shook hands, Vextal was surprised by the firm grip and the directness of her gaze. Admiral Chen, I must be honest. We sent that signal to dozens of species. You're the only ones who responded. That's because you asked for help, Chen replied simply. Humans have a hard time ignoring that, especially when an entire civilization is at stake. Dr. Webb stepped forward, carrying a datapad filled with analysis. Captain, we've studied your plague data extensively. Our xenobiologist teams believe they understand why your conventional approaches aren't working. Please explain. This organism isn't just a plague, Dr. Webb continued. It's what we would call a bioweapon. The way it adapts to your countermeasures, the way it specifically targets your biological technology, the timing of its emergence from ancient ice. We think your ancestors didn't just seal it away by accident. They deliberately imprisoned it. Vextal felt his 4 hearts skip beats. You're suggesting this was created as a weapon against our people? Admiral Chen nodded grimly. The pattern is consistent with biological warfare designed to target specific species. Someone created this to destroy Zalarian civilization specifically, and your ancestors fought a war against whoever deployed it. But if that's true, how can you possibly help us? If our ancestors, with all their knowledge, couldn't destroy it? Because humans fight wars differently than Zalarians, Admiral Chen said. Your people work with nature, try to find harmony and balance. When humans face an extinction-level biological threat, we don't try to cure it or convert it or live alongside it. What do? We kill everything, Dr. Webb said bluntly. We sterilize entire regions, poison the atmosphere if necessary, and rebuild from scratch. It's not elegant, and it's certainly not harmonious, but it works. Vextal was horrified. You're talking about destroying our world's ecosystem. Your world's ecosystem is already being destroyed, Admiral Chen pointed out. What we're proposing is controlled destruction followed by careful reconstruction. Think of it as surgery instead of slow death. Over the next 6 hours, the human team presented their plan. It was audacious, brutal, and completely contrary to everything Zalarian science represented. They wanted to deploy massive chemical weapons across infected areas, use controlled radiation bursts to sterilize the soil, and essentially burn away every trace of organic matter in affected regions. This will kill everything, protested Vextal's science advisor. Plants, animals, microorganisms, everything. Yes, Dr. Varga acknowledged. But the plague is killing everything anyway and converting it into more plague. Our way, you get dead soil that can be replanted. Their way, you get an entire planet that's actively hostile to life. The debate continued through the night as the plague continued its relentless advance across Zalara Prime. Finally, as dawn broke over the infected continents, Vextal made his decision. We have no choice. Proceed with your plan. What followed was the most coordinated biological warfare operation in galactic history. Human ships positioned themselves in precise formations around Zalara Prime, their weapons systems loaded with chemical compounds that would have been banned under most civilized world's weapons treaties. The assault began at dawn. Plasma charges created massive firestorms that burned infected vegetation down to ash. Chemical weapons turned purple corruption into harmless carbon compounds. Radiation bursts sterilized contaminated soil at the molecular level. It was devastating, total, and utterly effective. The Zalarians watched in horror and fascination as the humans systematically destroyed everything their ancestors had built. Cities turned to ash, ancient forests became barren wastelands, and thousands of years of carefully cultivated ecosystems disappeared in clouds of smoke and chemical fire. But the plague died with them. Within 72 hours, the advance of the purple corruption had stopped completely. Within a week, human biological teams confirmed that the plague organism was extinct on Zalara Prime. The humans had done something the Zalarians thought impossible. They had completely eliminated a bioweapon designed to be unstoppable. The infected areas are now completely sterile, Admiral Chen reported to Vextal as they stood looking at the transformed planet. No plague, no bacteria, no life at all, but also no threat. Our world is dead, Vextal said quietly. Your world is clean, Admiral Chen corrected. Dr. Webb, show him the reconstruction plans. What the humans presented next was even more impressive than their destruction. Detailed biological reconstruction protocols, carefully designed to rebuild Zalarian ecosystems using preserved genetic samples and human terraforming technology. It would take decades, but Zalara Prime could live again. Why? Vextal asked. Why would you help us rebuild after helping us destroy? Admiral Chen smiled, an expression the Zalarians had learned indicated human satisfaction. Because that's what humans do. We break things when they need to be broken, and we build things when they need to be built. Your people will return home, Captain. We'll make sure of it. 6 months later, as the first new forests began growing in the sterile soil of Zalara Prime, Captain Vextal received a message from the Galactic Council. Other species had begun requesting human assistance with their own biological crises. The reputation of human-controlled destruction was spreading, along with stories of their willingness to help anyone who asked. Humanity had found their place in galactic civilization not as conquerors or diplomats, but as the species other civilizations called when something needed to be destroyed in order to be saved. It was a role that suited them perfectly, and one that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The Zalarians had sent a desperate plea into the void, not knowing that they were calling upon the most aggressively helpful species in the galaxy. They had learned that sometimes the solution to an impossible problem required someone willing to burn everything down and start over. And sometimes, the most peaceful species in the galaxy needed warriors to save them from extinction.